This past October, Time magazine had an article, "Why is everyone so rude right now?" by Belinda Luscombe, and she offers several examples of rudeness. She wrote about a dining patron in Philadelphia who pulled a gun on the fast food servers who asked her to order online. Nothing unusual with that. She wrote about a Connecticut mother who slapped an elementary school bus driver. Not typical of how you treat bus drivers, from the parents at least. And she wrote about a California woman charged for assaulting a Southwest Airlines flight attendant, knocking out her teeth. I remember actually seeing that story on the news. And it seems almost every week story that we read about or see in our culture. She quotes Matteo Bonatti and Stephen Zeck of Monash University in Australia. They authored a book called Recovering Civility during COVID-19, and they say at the very beginning of the pandemic, people just didn't know how to be polite. It was hard to communicate with a smile because no one could see what face you were making at them. And it became necessary to avoid rather than embrace people. But after a certain point, the unintentional rudeness became intentional and deliberate. It would be fun to hear some of your stories of how you have observed that in your world. How did you see people's behavior decline civilly? She quotes Bernard Golden, a psychologist and author of Overcoming Destructive Anger. He says, quote, "We're going through a time where physiologically people's threat system is at a heightened level. This period of threat has been so long it may have had a damaging effect on people's mental health, which for many has been further debilitated by isolation, loss of resources, the death of loved ones, and reduced social support." Some of you have experienced that. You know what it was like to come out of this long winter of COVID. During COVID, there's been an increase in anxiety, a reported increase in depression, an increased demand for mental health services. Lots of people, in other words, are on their very last nerve. A friend of mine, Tony, back in Texas, a fellow bus driver, put this meme up here. Let's take a look at that. I had the rudest, slowest, nastiest cashier today. I guess it's my own fault for using the self-checkout line. Has there ever been in recent memory a better environment for the church? For those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus Christ, to show the difference that love makes, that Jesus makes in our lives. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, this is the Phillips translation. "If I speak with the eloquence of men and angels but have no love, I become no more than blaring brass or crashing cymbal. If I have the gift of foretelling the future and hold in my mind not only all human knowledge but the very secrets of God, and if I also have that absolute faith that can move mountains, but I have no love, I amount to nothing at all. If I dispose of all that I possess, yes, even if I give my own body to be burned, but have no love, I achieve precisely nothing. This love of which I speak is slow to lose patience." We talked about that last week, the idea of a long fuse versus a short fuse. "It looks for a way of being constructive," which we'll come back to. "It's not possessive, it's neither anxious to impress, nor does it cherish inflated ideas of its own importance. Love has good manners. It does not pursue selfish advantage. It's not touchy." I can't wait to get to that sermon. "It doesn't keep account of evil. It doesn't gloat over the wickedness of other people. On the contrary, it's glad with all good men when truth prevails. Love knows no limit to its endurance, no end to its trust, no fading of its hope. It can outlast anything. It is, in fact, the one thing that still stands when all else has fallen. For if there's prophecies, they will be fulfilled and done with. And if there's tongues, the need for them will disappear. If there's knowledge, it will be swallowed up in truth. For our knowledge is always incomplete. Our prophecy is always incomplete. And when the complete comes, that is the end of the incomplete. When I was a little child, I talked and felt and thought like a little child. And now that I am a man, my childish speech and feeling and thought have no further significance for me. At present, we are men looking at puzzling reflections in a mirror. The time will come when we shall see reality whole and face to face. At present, all I know is a little fraction of the truth, but the time will come when I shall know it as fully as God now knows me. In this life, we have three great qualities, lasting qualities: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of them is love. We've talked as we've gone through this series. Aaron Chambers is preaching this out at his church in Colorado. Two questions. How can I love other Christians better? And how can I love my community better? And again, just as a reminder that this series is because 1 Corinthians 13 is usually thought of as being read at weddings, and it's a marriage deal. And it was written to a church that had a whole lot of problems getting along with each other. And he wanted to remind them of love. And so I think it's a good season for us to be reminded of what love looks like. So we're going through 16 messages looking at each quality of love that Paul elaborates here. And I'll give you today's challenge up front rather than making you wait for it. My challenge is for you to practice intentional, random acts of kindness that point people to Jesus because we're kind. Because people are worth it. Because Jesus was kind. Would it look like him? One of my favorite passages is Luke 6:35. You remember Fred Craddock, one of America's greatest preachers. I had the opportunity to meet him and hear him speak several years ago. He said in a seminar to preachers at a North American Christian convention, I believe it was in Indianapolis, he said, if I could preach on one verse for the rest of my life, one verse, it would be this one. God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. The very people who most don't deserve it. The very people of whom it is the easiest to let nasty come out. God is kind to people like that. Are you? Am I? Now, there's two exceptions. Usually when you talk about God's kindness, the kindness of Jesus, usually people will throw up two arguments right away. Well, Jesus wasn't always kind. How about that time in the temple where he kicked over tables and he had really ugly things to say to the money changers in the temple? And how about Matthew chapter 23 where he just goes after the religious leaders and he doesn't have nice things to say there. He goes, whoa, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. And he calls them out for all the ways in which they are distorting the Word of God. I like what Aaron says here. It is kind to protect your father's heart and reputation from those who only want to make money. There are times when it is kind to call out people who are perverting the truth of the Bible, of the gospel, for selfish ends. It's all around us. Just flip on a Christian TV station and you're going to see lots of whack jobs out there flying helicopters that I'll never get. Distorting the truth for personal gain. This was happening back in Jesus' day. It is kind to tell bad people abusing others that they're only as good as tombs filled with dead men's bones. It is kind to call out false doctrine because people's eternal souls are in the balance. It's kind. But having said that, doing kindness isn't just about ourselves. It's not just about me. It's not just about making me look good. It's not just about how holy I am. It's not how holy our church is. It's not about evangelistic pressure. It's not like, okay, I'm going to be kind to this person, and now, because they think good of me, I'm going to slip them a tract. I'm going to give them an invitation to church. I'm going to say something religious sounding, which may be appropriate, but that's not what I'm talking about in this instance. I just want you to be kind and let it go. And let God do whatever he's going to do in the life of that person. What if we, just as followers of Jesus, spread kindness? Don't you think that would make a dent? Maybe not in Oregon, maybe not in Clatsop County, maybe not in North America. How about maybe in your workplace? How about maybe in your family? We just want to create opportunities for people to meet Jesus or see Jesus. Now, the Greek word for kindness, and I'm not going to bore you with all that stuff because I don't really know it that well. I just read it and can pronounce it half decent. The Greek word is only used here, and it carries the idea of the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. The root word kind of carries the idea of being useful or serving others. So it suggests a kindness that when it's lived out, it benefits and it blesses someone else. Kindness isn't passive. It's not about, well, I'm just going to sit here and I'm not going to bother anybody else. It's not about apathy. It's not about polite apathy. It's intentional. It does something. I like the translation we just read from 1 Corinthians 13, the Phillips translation. Verse 4 of that says, instead of kindness, love looks for a way of being constructive. So kindness is useful. You're doing something that's helping somebody, whether it's by your words or by your attitude. Do you know that attitudes can convey unkindness? Have you ever had someone do something for you, but there's this rolling of the eyes, this dropping of the shoulders, and they kind of like, I guess I'll do the dishes. Well, doing the dishes is useful. It's constructive. But the attitude conveys something way different. Kindness is an intentional blessing, serving of someone else. It's externally focused. And Jesus was kind in so many ways. It would be easy today to pick a way that Jesus was kind. But what we're going to do is pick a way that somebody was super kind to Jesus. It's recorded in 3 of the Gospels. It takes place a week before crucifixion. There's some disagreement among scholars if it's the same event or is it a separate event. I think there's enough evidence to indicate it's the same event, just because some details are a little bit different, but there's explanations for it. But we're going to look at what is kindness as we tell this story about Mary anointing Jesus prior to his death. We'll start in Matthew 26, and we're going to make the point that kindness is intentional. I'm going to give you a couple of things that kindness is. Mary had been paying attention. Jesus had been telling them for 3.5 years, I'm going to die. I'm going to go to Jerusalem. They're going to have mock trials. They're going to execute me. But on the 3rd day, I'm going to rise. And all of his followers just kind of missed that. But Mary, something stuck. No one else saw it coming, but she prepared his body for burial. They're at Bethany. They're at the home of Simon the leper. It may be where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus live. It may be a friend's house. We're not exactly sure. In John chapter 11, you remember that Lazarus had been raised from the dead, been in the tomb like 4 days, and they said, don't go in there. He stinks. He stinketh, the King James. Well, the next chapter is John 12. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom he had raised from the dead, and so they gave a dinner for him there. And Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Now, there's a picture. They didn't sit at tables like we do. It's not like the who's that famous Italian guy that painted the last? Who? Da Vinci. Da Vinci. It wasn't DiCaprio. It was Da Vinci. Okay. I get them confused. They actually lay down on like divans or sofas, and they would recline with an elbow, and they would eat this way. That's important for what happens next. Mary, therefore, took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard. Well, I don't know exactly what nard is, but it's apparently pure. And it smells really good, as opposed to other things maybe that don't smell as good. And she anoints the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. Now, in a moment, we're going to see that it says she also anointed his head. She may have done both, but for whatever reason, John just chooses to focus on that particular aspect. And this is important. We're going to get to this. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So Mary anoints Jesus with this very expensive perfume stuff. It was intentional. She saw something that others missed. And don't you appreciate those people? I'm married to one. It was too cheap to buy her a Mother's Day gift, so I'm just going to say something really nice in the sermon. No, seriously, I bought her scallops yesterday, and I'm going to let her cook them up on the grill after lunch. And if you saw Facebook, I also did a couple other nice things that have really punched my man card substantially. But my wife can see things that I'm absolutely clueless to. And she has on more than one occasion said, "Did you notice?" And I'm just a jerk. Like, huh? I'm a blind idiot. And she would agree with that. And she sees things. That's Mary. Mary saw something. She knew that Jesus was, maybe she read it in his spirit. Maybe there was a darkness to his spirit that the other guys were just too clueless to pick up on. But Mary, she has discernment. And she senses there's a ripple in the universe. And Jesus, and she anoints him with this really expensive stuff. And kindness requires investment. She was worshiping the guy that brought her brother back to life. Imagine that. So they're at this table, and Lazarus is there. The day before, he was dead. I still haven't decided if this was a good thing or not. I mean, he was in the presence of God. He was in holiness. He was in glory. And now he's back in Bethany. And I don't know if he did him a favor or not, but just imagine, how do you talk to a guy that was dead yesterday? Lazarus, were you just dying to get out of that grave, buddy? You know. Kindness requires investment. That Jesus had brought her brother that she clearly loved back to life. And the idea being that when we love somebody, kindness should just kind of come out. And if it doesn't, it certainly calls into question how real is that love. Mark chapter 14 picks up on this. Mark 14, verse 5. And while he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly. She broke the flask and poured it over his head, and there were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was this ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. And they scolded her, but Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She's done a beautiful thing to me. You're always going to have the poor, and whenever you want, you can do good to them, but you're not always going to have me. She's done what she could. She's anointed my body beforehand for burial." And Mary's probably sitting there going, aha, I knew something was up. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. We're told that the value of this nard was 300 denarii, which scholars estimate to be about 1 year's salary in Oregon. I looked it up, and that would be about 46 grand. Be about $46,000 on average. For a family of 3, that would be 4 years of groceries. So she's not giving him a cheap gift. A pound of scallops, way more. This is an investment. So what is Jesus worth to you? What are you willing to invest to reach people that Jesus died to love? If he's worth this much to us, then the people he died for will be worth whatever it costs to love better. We're just talking about being kind. But as you're kind in your day-to-day life, it may cost you. It may cost you money. It may cost you energy. It may cost you time, most likely. Because people are messy, and when you start helping in one area, that tends to, oh, here's another, here's another. This kindness creates impact. So it's intentional, it's an investment. We're kind of doing the eyes here. John 12:3, the house was filled with fragrance. Everyone is immersed in and impacted by the fragrance of Mary's kindness. Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 that we, followers of Jesus, we are the aroma of Christ. We are the fragrance of Christ. Where we go in our world, we're smelling like something. And here's the question. What fragrance are you sharing with others? Now, I realize for teenage boys, that's a really dangerous question. As a matter of fact, I special ordered a can of something that comes in a can. It was supposed to be here yesterday. Wasn't exactly sure how I was going to use it, but I can assure you it didn't come. I woke up this morning to a message from Amazon saying, sorry, it'll be there tomorrow. So I'm going to have this can of something in a can. Not exactly sure what to do with it. A couple Christmases ago in Kentucky, we got my oldest daughter with it. I think my son-in-law actually had it, but he made me use it. And my daughter was going around, who's doing that? Who's doing that? And then finally we got her. But we do have Febreze. And that's going to waft over you here in a bit. It's going to smell pretty good. What fragrance are you sharing? Your fragrance is important. The Huffington Post reports that Nicolae Glatania of Romania is famous for the smelliest armpits in the world. Yeah, that's Happy Mother's Day. What you said, does he live with you? Anyone goes near him, they gasp, they cough, they faint, and he bathes all the time, and he's constantly putting cologne on, and he puts deodorant on several times a day. He has no problem with social distancing. The last 2 years have been easy peasy for him. But he's dating this woman. Guess where she works?
At the sewer.
Close. She works at the fish market. So she probably doesn't have a clue. We all know some Christians who stink. What fragrance are you leaving behind? That's what I want. That's the image I want to leave you with, is everywhere you go as a follower of Jesus, if you let people know you're a Christian, but you're unkind, you're rude, you're picky, you're touchy, you're just got a horrible spirit about you, please don't tell them you go here. Tell them you go to the Baptist church around the corner, or My best friend came here last week, Grant. Well, what do you do when someone from out of country visits Astoria? Some of you may not realize this, but there have been some movies filmed here. So I'm taking them to all the movie places. And we drive by, it's up there at Franklin. What house is that? Kindergarten teacher's house. He hadn't even seen the movie. So we watched the movie the night before, and then we drive by, showing him where all the places, took all the scenes were. And I make the corner there at the turn. It's interesting, in the movie, Arnie comes racing up the hill, but there's no road down there. So I pointed out how fake that was. And I make the turn, and I know I've got to do a U-turn, 50 feet away. And there's this woman gardening it's obviously the owner. And I'm a smiley kind of guy, so I just roll down the window and say, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "You probably know why I'm here, right?" And I get the look. "Yes. And I don't appreciate it." He's from Toronto. I said, "I'm so sorry, we're not going to take pictures. I just wanted to show my friend he's never seen the movie and he's never seen the house, and we'll get out of your hair." And went down there, and he's like, "Wow, are all Americans like that?" I mean, if you're going to buy a house that is famous for being a movie, you would think you would embrace it. I've been so scared by what I've read online to go up to the Goonie house, but I read now is quite open. Just don't drive up there, and she'll even let you in and look around. That hasn't always been the case, but that's what I read most recently. And if you lived in a house like that, wouldn't you look forward to the fact you're going to have guests and the opportunity to meet people from Canada? And then I'm wondering, I wonder what church she goes to. Hopefully she's an atheist. Now, Rihanna, on the other hand, has been voted as the world's best smelling woman. Just to balance off that Romanian guy there. Insider magazine in February of 2021. So what's your fragrance like? Is the fragrance of your kindness more like Latanya or Rihanna? You smell like something. And the people who left Mary's house, they smelled like perfume. And what do other people smell like when they've been in your presence? Have you ever been around someone that smokes? Tobacco, pot, whatever. And after 5 minutes, it's in your clothes. And what's the first thing you do when you get back to your place? Take them off. Throw them in the wash. No one wants to smell that stuff. When people leave your presence, they shouldn't have to wash their clothes, metaphorically speaking. Kindness creates impact. It may also invite criticism. Here's Matthew's account again, 26, beginning of verse 6. And when the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why the waste? This could have been sold for a large sum of money. We already saw it was $46,000. It could have been given to the poor. But Jesus, aware of this, said, "Why do you trouble the woman? She's done a beautiful thing. For you always have the poor, you'll not always have me. And in pouring this ointment on my body, she's done it to prepare me for burial." Now Matthew here is running interference for Judas. John 12 tells us that Judas was the complainer, but all the Gospels say that all the guys got in on it. They were ganging up on this woman here. Judas was the number one complainer. He didn't care about the poor, John says. He was a thief, and he used to help himself to what was in the money bag. So when you decide you're going to do something kind for somebody, let me just warn you, you might just face criticism for it. Someone in your world is going to say, "What a waste of energy, what a waste of resources. They don't deserve it. You could spend that money somewhere else better. Blah, blah, blah." Consider the source. And do not let criticism drive you away from what you are doing in the name of Jesus. You're trying to be kind. And even if you lose, even if it's a bad investment, even if the person, for whatever reason, goes south, you still be kind. You're responsible for what you can do. You're not responsible for how someone else responds to it. Don't let them drive the kindness out of you. And don't let your spouse or your friend or your coworker drive the kindness out of you. You be kind. She's done a beautiful thing for me. He saw her act of kindness as done for him. Be kind right now. Mary didn't wait. Kindness can be illustrious. Had to reach for that word to make it fit, but illustrious is defined as being well known, respected, admired for past achievements, kind of like a legacy. Jesus said, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Her story is insignificant as it appears. She poured some perfume on a guy. Will be told, and it's being told right now. So what Jesus said is still coming true. This little act of kindness left a legacy. It's illustrious, it's admired, it's respected for something she did in the past. Let me ask you a question. What are some acts of kindness that you remember? This is a fun question, and I'd like to have you do some table discussions at lunch or whatever. This would be a good one. Who was really kind to you in your past that made an impact that you'll never forget? We'd been fired from a church in Ohio. My wife was very close to giving birth to our last daughter. We were living in a barn with my stepsister, the one whose mom was killed, I mentioned earlier. They took us, said, there's an act of kindness. Guy and Wendy, who had just had a new baby, took in this family of two with a third on the way and opened up their space and gave us a sanctuary. But we're going to the Dublin apartments in Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia. And we don't have any money. I don't have a job yet. She doesn't have a job. What are we going to do? And I usually leave the negotiating of financial stuff to my wife because she's, if you haven't figured out, is way smarter than me. And I'm in the other room just praying. Say, God, we need something. Can't stay with Guy and Wendy forever. And Kim's out there talking to Bob DiStefano, and he says, so what's your husband do for a living? And I'm like, oh, no, this will not end well. No, I just want to crawl under my blankie and ask for my mommy. She goes, well, my husband's a pastor, and we just had a bad experience at a church in Ohio, and we're trying to get back on our feet, and we don't really know what we're going to do yet. He said, stop right there. He said, me and my partner was Rich. I forget Rich's last name. Me and my partner bought these apartments, and there were probably 150 or so. They were a big apartment complex. We're followers of Jesus, and we committed them to Christ when we bought them, and we want them to be used for his glory. Forget the deposit. And don't worry about the rent until you land on your feet, and then we'll figure it out from there. Welcome home. Like, wow. Think I'm ever going to forget Bob DiStefano? No, he smelled really good that day. Gave my wife a job cleaning apartments. She would go around as people moved out of the apartments with two little kids in tow. Pregnant or last. Thing is, Joe Martin was the property manager. He never told her and drove her nuts. And she was always going on, you know, how did you guys get in here? I don't see your deposit on the books. Don't worry about it. Bob's got it. We remember when people are kind to us. My preacher's wife one time, in that same time period, gave us an envelope with $1,000. Didn't have to be paid back. Our church had a pounding. They used to do this all the time for people that were in need. I don't know where the expression came from, whether it was pounding someone with love or whether it was everyone bring a pound of food, but it's called a pounding. We'd seen them do it before. We'd brought food, and we walked in one Sunday, and a great big table set in the back of the room is filled with food. Like, oh, they're having a pounding. No one told us. It's for us. Kindness. I had a guy loan me $30,000 once for buying a house. He had sold a bunch of land, had the cash, didn't need it, said, this money is yours, interest free. When you sell the house, just pay me back what I loaned you. We'll call it even. Like, whoa. Who am I? to withhold kindness when it's within my power. Had a preacher friend just this week, I put on Facebook, tell me a time when someone was kind to you and it surprised you. He sold his Jeep last week, going to buy a truck. Sold his Jeep, his beloved Jeep, for $10,000 from someone in his church. And he took him the title and the paperwork and all the stuff you got to do to complete the transaction. And he says, so who you buying this for? Which one of your kids or your grandkids? Who's going to get the Jeep? Is it for you? What are you going to do with it? He handed the paperwork back. And bought it. Enjoy your Jeep and your truck. It's like, you think he's ever going to forget that? We remember kindness because it's intentional. Someone saw me. It cost someone something to do it for me. It made a difference in my life. It may have invited criticism. I don't know. Was the guy's wife on board with that? You gave him what? And he never forgot it. It was illustrious. What stories are going to be told about your acts of kindness? That's what I want to leave with. When someone talks about how they were surprised by kindness years from now, will your name come up? Will our church name come up? It's not a big deal, but this week I came in and there was a card under my door from a neighbor next door. The Broomstick Baptists are mowing our lawn now. And they mowed the neighbor's lawn too. They were not expecting it. And there's a lovely card. I didn't open it, just said to the lovely mother and her son who mowed our lawn when we weren't expecting it. I thought, wow, we smell good to them. And so I called Kevin and said, I got a card here waiting for you. I put it back in his little cubby there, and I hope he shares it with me later. When people in Astoria are asked, can you think of someone right now who made a positive impact on your life because they were kind to you? Wouldn't it be great if our church was the answer? Let me give you some ideas. I invite you to be creative. Post-it notes. Just take a post-it note and decide once a day, I'm just going to leave it. Leave one for your spouse or your kid or your parent or co-worker. Just, hey, I appreciate you. Thanks for doing. Just think of something encouraging. I read actually, if you Google random acts of kindness, there's all sorts of really cool stories that come up. This one kid was a 7th grader and up in Newfoundland, and she went to a new school, and it was she having a hard time making friends. It just wasn't going well for her, and so she started taking Post-it notes and put them in every locker, anonymously. And it changed the culture of the entire school. See, that's what kindness. Sometimes we think that the way that we change culture is by ranting and raving and getting mad and posting horrible things on social media and voting. And there is a place for political activism, but the real change comes through this sort of stuff. You can change the environment of wherever you are. Buy coffee for the person behind you. That's always fun. Gift cards for your kids' teachers. Start a GoFundMe to meet a need. Text people specific words of encouragement. Like, dear Jim, hope your scallops are good. Maybe start a community garden if you're into flowers and plants. Maybe buy a gift card for someone in a difficult situation. Put encouraging notes in a car window. Just anywhere. Front door, locker, desk, computer screen. Some great questions. How can I help? Remember, kindness is constructive. What do you need? As opposed to accusation, someone does something and I'm really good at this. Well, you idiot, if you'd have done this, you're in this mess because you should have done that. I'm great at pointing out faults. Guilt trips, attacks. But man, when people don't do that to me, I so appreciate it. Years ago, I had knee surgery. tried to take a gold wing down and tore my ACL in this knee, and it hurt like a son of a gun, and I had surgery on it. And 6 weeks post-surgery, I'm driving a school bus, and I'm doing a fire drill out the back door with a bunch of elementary schools, and I just give them the message, this is safe, this won't hurt, you can do this, we'll get you out of the bus. And like a fool, I jumped out, which is 4.5 feet high, setting off the ground. And in midair, I remembered I shouldn't be doing this. I should have gotten my butt and scooted down. Too late. And somehow I landed and busted my kneecap. And it hurt. And I'm lying on the ground. And I'm turning red, and I'm trying not to cry. And here's these little kindergartners. What happened to Mr. Gibbs? And so the teachers, they get the kids off the bus, and like an idiot, I drive the bus back to the bus barn because I was too proud, I was too ashamed, I was too stupid. And I had at that time a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck that was a 5-speed, which means my left foot had to work the clutch. Oh, it hurt. Fortunately, it was just around the block, and I went to Dr. Nagel. There's a picture of Dr. Nagel. He is a masterful surgeon and very stoic, stern, no nonsense, proud of his work. He'd show you the x-ray post-surgery and say, is that not the best work you've ever seen in your life? And all I could think was, I got to go into Dr. Nagel and say, I messed up your operation. I'm so sorry. And I was scareder of him than I was of how bad this hurt. And he surprised me with kindness. Sometimes being kind is just not overreacting. I said, Doc, I'm so sorry. I'm an idiot. I did all the mea culpa stuff that I could think of. And he said, hey, these things happen. Let's just take an x-ray, see how bad it is. I don't think you messed up my work. It's that good. Someone had enabled him, empowered him to be kind. And so I want to free you up. I want to let you know, if you're a follower of Jesus, you are hereby empowered to be kind. Turn to your neighbor and say, you are empowered to be kind. No, thank you. It took a while for that to ripple through the massive crowd. And it starts in this room. One of the worst things that you can say about a church, if you ask a guest why they didn't go back to a church, what do they say? No one talked to me. It was cold. I felt like they were all in their little cliques, and I walked in and I walked out, and no one said a word. And we have a couple in this room who pray for guests that they don't know and make it their Sunday goal to take them out to lunch if they'll go with them. I'm not going to identify them. I don't want to. They wouldn't want that, but I'm telling you. That's kindness. Praying before church, Lord, I pray there's a guest there, and I pray that they'll say yes, and we can go out and just get to love on them and get to know. Is that cool? Yes. The world's a rude place right now, my friends. I don't have to tell you that. But you can change that. Be intentional. Make the investment. Watch God create the impact. It's going to invite criticism. Ignore it. And to the glory of God, it will be unforgettably illustrious. Jesus says in Luke, God is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. That's a challenge. You be like that, but it's also an invitation. This is the kind of God who will take you back. So my friend Grant calls me yesterday when we're up at Oysterville. He says, I was thinking about what you're preaching this week. He says, I thought you might like this story. He listens to podcasts. And it was a podcast, and they were talking about an AA group, and they were trying to do their AA group with Zoom, online cameras. Didn't work. You know why? I never would have guessed. They couldn't smell each other. Yeah. Apparently, it's a thing. Alcoholics can tell how they're doing with the alcohol. Whether it's the breath, whether it's coming out perspiration. They needed to smell each other to hold each other accountable and to make sure that what they were trying to accomplish was actually being accomplished among the group. And I thought that is such a cool story. Let me ask you this. Do we smell like kindness to each other? People will pick up on it if we don't, and they won't want to come back. Who wants to be around unkindness? But man, if there is kindness being smelled, they'll come back. And God will be pleased. And those who don't know Jesus Christ will be attracted by the fragrance of kindness. Father God, help us smell better in ways that matter most. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.